Hello, everybody. This is Craig Garrenti, and welcome to the world's greatest licensing podcast. We are happy to have you, and we finally have a name for our podcast. Today, I am really happy that we are joined by my friend Mark Kenny, who is the founder of Keystone Negotiation. So, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, Craig, and congrats on the new podcast. Love the name. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, listen, there's a lot of pressure on you because now you are the world's greatest podcast guest for today. So you need to
Hey,
be literally the world's best podcast guest.
okay, I'm glad you've told me that now the podcast has started recording.
So Mark is an expert in a few things, but particularly, I think folks here want to listen to what you have to say about Microsoft. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of your bio. Mark
Sure.
founded Keystone Negotiations back in 2017, and they are the leading provider of independent Microsoft negotiation services around the world. So when one of our clients needs help with Microsoft, we send them off to Mark. Before that, you spent a little bit of time at Microsoft. You were a national sales manager. You created their deal coaching methodology, which is really interesting. So you were helping Microsoft sellers sell. And one of the things I noticed in your bio is that your team that you helped train over 200 contracts with the lowest average discounts. So you were helping Microsoft negotiate the lowest average. Your team was negotiating the lowest discounts, which means you know what you're talking about when it comes to Microsoft.
Sure. So thanks, I guess, thanks for the intro. And you're right. Have been in the IT industry. Um, I like to say before the web or before the internet. That's kind of the timeline. Probably not technically before the internet, but certainly before the browser became a thing. So by the time I popped out of college, it was the very early 90s, late 80s. And my first job was a COBOL programmer. So I'm certainly showing my age there on big digital mainframe computers and was a ball and programmer. And then the story goes, I was at work as a developer in Australia, and someone broke the news to me that the sales rep was getting paid 3 times what I was. I stopped coding that day and walked over to this group and kind of had a look around, and they were starting to sell networking gear. It was kind of just before Cisco got big. And that is probably the best ever case of being in the right place at the right time, working for a very large Cisco reseller when the internet got invented. So definitely jagged that one. I'm not sure that was all skill. It was certainly the right place at the right time. They became a Microsoft reseller, the highest level of certification. Then I worked for another Microsoft reseller and then worked at Microsoft for 13 years, like you said. So the timeline at Microsoft's also interesting. I started selling Windows XP and left selling Azure. So that was the
Wow.
technology shift. I went from, it was very on-prem then. Um, I joined in 2004. My job was to sell software assurance or maintenance on XP with the vision, and the value proposition was Windows Vista. Now, if any of you remember, that didn't go real well. Um, but lo and behold, there was a big shift to the cloud. We changed CEOs twice while I was there. It was a great time. It was a fantastic place to be at that time. And I think the point you raise about um, in the licensing management role I had, my job was to initially do the first pass of discount requests, anyone in the field that was doing a deal. And then that went on to other higher level people for approval. But yes, our job was to try and make deals programmatic, keep the discounts low, and make them as big as possible in terms of revenue. Um, I'm kind of doing the exact opposite of that now. Where our discounts we want them to be as large as possible in the role I'm in now, as well as looking at a lot of other parts of the deal. So yeah, it's been certainly an interesting journey over that time. And I think we crossed paths many of our customers ask us for help with other vendors. They ask us if we do Oracle, ServiceNow, Salesforce, all sorts of things, and that's how we connected. And we've met face to face and done seminars and webinars and deals together. So yeah, that's a bit of the interesting backstory. But in summary, yes, we're totally focused on Microsoft enterprise agreement and Azure and unified support renewals. And we're growing rapidly. I stopped posting on LinkedIn that we're hiring because we're always hiring. Um,
People
uh,
need that much help. Companies need that much help.
yeah, and I think that's what we're here today to talk a bit about kind of what's happening in the Microsoft space and more broadly.
No, I like one of the many reasons why I like talking with you is your timeline is very similar to mine. So
Mm.
I started Oracle in the mid 90s. Before the internet, and it was client
Right.
server, and it was all client
Yeah.
server. Oracle's application price list was one page, and now it's probably 50 pages, and now it's
Mm-hmm.
all about cloud and all of that. So you did this thing at Microsoft where you were training the salespeople, and now you're sort of on the other side. I know that you have wrote a book, The Truth About Negotiating with Microsoft, and you guys at Keystone Negotiation have online training available to people. So that's one of the things that I love is it's
Mm.
not just about the consulting services and we're going to help you do this, but you're actually helping people, teaching them how to fish, let's say. So are
Yeah.
you so one of the things that I see is, and sometimes it makes me sad, is that people are less proactive than I would love them to be. I'd love to do more training for people and less, less firefighting and putting out audits and sort of critical negotiations. How is it on the Microsoft side? Are the teams, are the people more proactive, or are they also waiting for something to break before they call you?
Um, so no, you raise a few good points. Firstly, the book you briefly mentioned is a good example of being locked down at home during COVID.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah. Now, that was written before AI. Now, if you do that kind of thing now, you would have a very big helping hand in writing that.
Right.
If anyone ever says writing a short ebook is very quick and easy, back then it wasn't. Now it probably is a lot easier. Um, and likewise, the training course, yeah, we've had a lot of success with that. We've had big IT companies buy it at scale and train their people um, to have those skills, which are very broad, not just focused on Microsoft. Um, Likewise, making a 20 video module training course is a lot more work than what I originally thought it was going to be, but no, that's been a great addition to the portfolio of services that we have. Um, Inside Microsoft, the point you raise about the deal strategy work, very much so the plan there was to help people plan their big contract renewals well in advance and have some structure around that. And what we created was a bit of an objective measure of the health of your deal. So we could go through a 45-minute conversation about where you're at, what you've got, what the timeline is, what you're trying to sell, issues, and have a formula that produced a number out of 100, the health of your deal. Some people didn't like their number. Some people were very happy with their number, but it was designed as certainly if your number was low, you got help. Now you can read into the word help. Some people help might be inspection or top-down visibility, but if
Right.
your number was low, you got help. If you didn't want help, that was real easy. You needed a higher number. So it was a way for people to kind of look at that and try and get more organized, try and arrive with all of the work you needed so it wasn't a mad rush and panic at the end. Now, lo and behold, a lot's changed since I did that work. Um, for multiple reasons, there's still a mad rush at the end of doing these deals. I think there always will be, to be honest with you, but um, a lot's changed in the Microsoft space. And I'll give you a good example. In 2024, there were 210 changes to the product terms. We've had that number so far this year, and we're in June.
Wow. Wow.
right? So that's not getting easier.
Now,
And
do they let you know when something changes? Are they publishing like an
um,
alert, or is it just you find it by accident, or one of your
oh no, it
colleagues
gets
brings it
published
to
in
you?
the product terms and program guides. You've got to go trawling through various things to find it. And there are companies that just specialized in finding that every month and broadcasting it.
Hmm.
Um, so it's not summarized that well. There are, like I said, there's other companies that summarize it that aren't negotiators that summarize it and help you find that. But I'd say that's one of the things. It's getting more complex because Microsoft, as they move more and more to the cloud, they're moving on-prem products to the cloud. So whereas an on-prem product had one part number, they'll say, okay, you've now got to buy that as an Azure SKU. It has 20 part numbers, depending on how you use it. Security updates you used to buy as an on-prem SKUs, that's now an Azure SKU. So there's all sorts of things that are happening there. And they're changing contract types as well. Probably the opposite of
I heard the EA was going away. Is that true?
yeah. So the main contract that's been in place for 30 odd years is being discontinued. That's a big deal, right? That they've started doing that for small customers. It'll take many years for that to roll out to their biggest customers.
Now,
Um,
all in an effort to make it more transparent and less expensive and easier for customers, correct?
well, that's what Microsoft marketing says, I think.
The fact that
Um,
you guys are so busy, I think probably there's a different
yeah,
answer to that question.
different answer to that question. So changing the contract type, um, yes, the terms and conditions are shorter, but it changes the pricing of most products. It changes how you do amendments and concessions. And there's a big difference if you're in the United States or outside of the United States, because Microsoft, for a very long time, have had to report quarterly to the SEC US dollars or constant currency because they've got so many currencies around the world. And it's a bit of a quarterly accounting challenge. So move to this new contract where every month you're indexed to the US FX rate instead of transacting in all of these local currencies. Now that's kind of easy for Microsoft, but if you're a customer, it's like your price is a moving target. Isn't that helpful for your IT budget? And your
Yes.
discount percentage is kind of half of the formula for working out what your actual price is. So yeah, look, lots of change. The rate of change is increasing with Microsoft in line with the number of products they're releasing and their innovation and what they're doing with AI. How they charge for AI started as $30 a user a month. Now there's all these consumption rates associated with it.
Right.
So that it is a kind of long answer to your question, but look, it's a different type of change with Microsoft commercially, contracts, licensing, products, and also how they deal with deals is changing, right? It used to be quite easy to get a discount. You asked for it and they looked at it and you kind of got it and moved on. It's a little bit more confrontational. It's a little bit more split between who you deal with locally and when you escalate. So our business has changed with them in terms of how you negotiate. What we were doing 3 years ago is different to how we negotiate now. We've had to change and adapt to things that they're doing as well. So yeah, it's. I mean, if it was the same, it'd probably be boring after a while, but it's changing faster than it has changed before.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me because sometimes I feel on the Oracle side, I say the same thing today that I said 15 years ago, and then sometimes it's totally different, right? Or it's a new product, or now we're
Mhm.
talking about cloud versus, you know, EBS, e-business suite, or ERP, or whatever. Um, So as we're recording this, actually just looked while you were speaking, and Oracle just released their earnings. So they had a great fiscal year end, and their stock is up 8%. So that is hot off the presses. I'll have to take a look at that and do some deep dive into that. But it's also getting to Microsoft's year end. So we've got what, 3 weeks left, and a little less than 3 weeks left for them. We used to call it at Oracle the hockey stick, right? A hockey stick just goes way. So the volume of business Oracle does in the last week, even though now it's cloud and the revenue recognition is totally different than on-prem The amount of business Oracle does the last week is ridiculous and probably
Mhm.
equals what they do for the entire quarter. And that's is it the same for Microsoft? Do you get a better deal by waiting till the last day of June to sign that deal?
Um, it's probably less than it used to be 10 or 20 years ago, June. It used to be crazy the last week or two of June. You know, if I told you they did 40% of their annual business there, I think that'd be about right. But what's happened with some parts of their cloud business, in particular Azure, it bills in arrears every month. So you don't have this one day where most of your Azure bills, right? Even if you're in an Azure commitment, it still bills in arrear every month. If you pay as you go, it bills in arrears every month. So that has flattened. Um, Microsoft 365, sure, most of their enterprise agreements pay annually in advance. It's actually a big contradiction inside Microsoft's commercial model and how they do revenue. They've got almost half of it billing monthly in arrears and the other half billing annually in advance. The June 30 date for Microsoft is their global end of financial year and their reporting date. Um, the thing that will happen is if your enterprise agreement is due for renewal on the 1st of July, there's a mad panic to get it processed in June. So you've either got things getting processed in June that bill in July or processed in June, billed in June. So if you're billed in June, you're getting prioritized. If you're the 1st of July, it doesn't really matter if it's the middle of July, you'll get billed in July. There's not a, it is kind of less important than revenue recognition in June. So I think that's changed. It's probably less of a stressed date. I know there's people inside Microsoft that will disagree with me that are currently frantically trying to get things billed. Um, but I honestly think it's less than it used to be. Where your EA renewal date is very important. There are dates that aren't really good. End of December is generally horrible because no one's
Why
around to
why
help
is
you.
that? Oh, because no one's there?
No one's there. Like people aren't at Microsoft to help you. Your deal will slip into mid or late January if that happens. Um, End of June is actually not good for an anniversary date because, like I just said, the sense of urgency isn't there. And because your deal's actually going to bill somewhere in July
Hmm.
or maybe August. Um, the best day of the Microsoft financial year to have a contract anniversary date is the end of May, because
Oh,
that means your agreement bills in June, which means Microsoft have to bill it before the end of the financial year. So they will have time pressure on them. So if you're a customer listening to this, a Microsoft customer, and you get the opportunity to move an anniversary date, move it to the end of May. All the time pressure and leverage um, will move towards the customer's benefit there. And we've had customers intentionally do that at the back end of their multi-year agreements.
hmm. That's a smart move. I mean, and it lines perfectly with Oracle. I tell people all the time, I want your deal with Oracle to end on May 31st. And then, which
Yep.
is the end, they're the end. So it's a month earlier than, let's say, Microsoft, where you're month 11. With Oracle, that's literally the last day of the quarter. And there's sort of two
Right.
things, and I'm wondering if it's the same at Microsoft. At Oracle, there's two things happening. One is how does the company recognize revenue? So $1 million of license revenue on-prem they'll recognize in May, but $1 million of cloud will be 1/12, right? Every month they'll recognize
Right.
12th of that. But the salespeople, that is the driver of the deal. The salesperson's commission is tied to getting that thing signed on May 31st within the year versus they make a lot less money if it signs, on June 1st than May 31st. So is the and maybe you just don't know this because you've been out of Microsoft, but is the Microsoft sales team, and I guess you could see it from the behavior on your side of the
Mhm.
table now, are they as equally driven? Like it's got to sign by June 30th, or if it signs in July, it sort of slips into their next plan?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. So Microsoft salespeople, which is they're not people managers, right? So that's a lower level but important and well-paid
Right.
role. Have four chunks to their compensation. They have a base salary, they have a revenue commitment, which is sales commission. They have other commitments around their training, not upsetting your colleagues, being a good corporate citizen, all the things, and then stock. right? So that's kind of the package. The revenue one, which was your question, um, they're billed on invoice out the door. They're not responsible for accounts receivable, and they're not ultimately, that revenue portion isn't tied to the signature date. The signature date is important because you've got to get the thing processed and preferably not have a lapse in contract coverage. But if you have a lapse in contract coverage, but it's a really good deal with massive growth, you get paid on the big deal of massive growth revenue. And no one wants a lapse in contract coverage. We don't. It's not good as a negotiator on the customer side either. We don't intentionally do that. It happens. And it happens in more deals than you'd think. There's a lapse because of the negotiation or something's happening. But the revenue sales quota, which is higher than sales budget, so the account manager and the licensing person will have a sales quota. That's invoice out the door. Doesn't matter when or if or how it's paid or any of that kind of stuff. Invoiced. It's either invoiced to the reseller or invoiced to the customer, and then accounting follows that up and gets the money in. So yeah, the signature date, if you have a lapse in contract coverage inside Microsoft, it's frowned upon. It's frowned upon, A, because you didn't do your job properly, and B, you have to go and get all your discounts reapproved
Hmm.
by the deal desk, back through that entire process of a week or so. And then that's frowned on. Why didn't you do it? Why is it running late? And there's a lapse and bad. And technically, one or two things can happen if you have a lapse of the cloud environment as well. So yeah, that's kind of structurally how that works. Part of our job is to bring these insights to the customer so they know why Microsoft are doing certain things and what their motivations are. And we're able to kind of craft a deal strategy and a timeline to make sure that's a success.
So, obviously, the earlier someone comes to you, so if they have
Sure.
an EA that expires next May, this is perfect time. You got a year
Mm-hmm.
to plan it out. What about that call you're going to get tomorrow, the next day, from someone who's like, "Oh my gosh, my EA ends at the end of June. What do I
Mm-hmm.
do? How can you like what some recommendations for those folks who haven't planned out or sort of it snuck up on them or they just haven't been able to get a deal over the line with Microsoft? Is there anything they can do now on, the middle of June to help them for the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, so we're here in the middle of 2025. We're starting multiple Microsoft renewals now that are June 2026. We're doing project kickoff meetings now for paid engagements. So that's really getting on the front foot, but these are plus $100 million, $200 million enterprise agreements. If someone comes to you now and says, I've got 3 weeks until my agreement
Yeah.
ends,
Yes,
um,
exactly. The house is on
I'll
fire. Help me.
it happened, I'm sure, Craig, it's happened to you as well, probably when you're inside Oracle and outside as well. Um, but, well, I'll just kind of put that in perspective. I get a phone call at 5:30 on a Friday from a customer I've never spoken with before. I'm actually at a sporting event. They put me on speakerphone in the boardroom, and they're on the top level of a big high rise in Sydney City. Okay, good. We want to talk to you about our enterprise agreement. Sure, not a problem. I'm in the middle of multiple basketball courts and it's very loud. And I've got the CIO and I'm in the boardroom with all of their direct reports. I said, when's your agreement end? And they said 6 weeks ago. Okay. So if someone comes to me and says it's any date in the future, generally I'm over the first hurdle. Um, but um, if someone genuinely came and said my agreement ends in 2 or 3 weeks, firstly, there's probably more to the story. Either
Mhm.
either there that normally happens if you're in a deadlock. That most people won't have a self-realization that their 3-year contract ends in 2 weeks. If it does happen because there's been a change in staff or a merger or an acquisition or a divestiture or machinery of government change, if there's a reason, yes, there's certain things we can do. Firstly, if there's 2 weeks to go and you're looking at it, there's a potential you're non-compliant because your annual true-up was due about 6 weeks ago, right? So we've got to kind of look at some of the process things that are happening.
So
Um,
Microsoft has that leverage now because you've slipped
Sure.
out of compliance. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd want to, depending on how big your spend is, you'd probably have to point the finger at Microsoft a bit and go, "What? How did this happen?" But no, there's certain things we can do. You're kind of probably going to have one pass at negotiation. You're going to not have a lot of time to review the legal terms and conditions. Um, Experience and benchmarking and fast tracking the process would be at play. So the answer is you'd have to do things quite rapidly at that point. Um, I would hope that that wasn't very common, that scenario. For very small customers, if the customer had under 500 staff, you know, so I'd say it was 50 or 100 people, which is not a market that we operate in a lot. That happens more often because there's just normally no IT person. So no one's across it. Large customers, 5, 10,000 staff, 100,000 staff, we don't see that happen that often, thankfully to the people that are on top of it. Once we do a project with a customer, um, we then know the anniversary date. So
Mm.
then each year we're normally working with the customer. So I think gone are the days where we do a big negotiation and then we don't talk to the customer for 3 or 5 years. What tends to happen now is we do the big negotiation, it's signed, everyone's happy, and then every month or every quarter we have a connection through the life of that contract to make sure you're not over licensed, to make sure you're not overpaying, to make sure you're aware of promotions, to validate what the reseller's telling you, and to keep the thing on track, right? To make sure the cost savings that we negotiated are actually being realized. So we tend to stay in a very small capacity during the contract now. And then that means the next renewal is a lot easier. So this is a new small subscription service that we offer as part of the renewals where we actually stay. And your question was, what happens if you don't hear from someone and it's 2 weeks? That would be a customer we've probably never spoken with before. Because customers we have done deals with before, that just doesn't happen because our job is to make sure that doesn't happen.
And that's definitely something, a transformation we've seen on the Oracle side as well, where,
Hmm.
in 2011, we would help a client through what Oracle calls a ULA, unlimited
Right.
license agreement, similar to an EA, in terms of the importance to the vendor. I know the T's and C's are very different, and they would go away. And they would come back 3 years later, and we would help them do
Uh-huh.
another one, and they would go. It doesn't happen like that anymore because now you've got so many different components to it. You've got the license spend, you've got the support spend, you've got the cloud spend, you've got to monitor all this, and the client has to monitor this. And one of the things I've noticed is um, we're often the continuity at the client. They're like, why did we do this 7 years ago? I was like, well, let me tell you why we did it 7 years. Because everyone is new or gone or different. Then there's no one there when we started helping them 7 years ago. So we're able to provide, and that really gives the client leverage. Like when they could tell Oracle, when they can tell a vendor, hey, this is why we did that, and this is what, and even the Oracle team doesn't know, right? Because they're all
Right.
gone. The sales reps come and go. It's very rare. You'll have an account manager stay with an account for 3 or 4 years at Oracle. They're just gone, right? They're doing other things. Oracle
Right.
reorganizes. So just having that continuity, I think, is really important. So it's interesting that it's the same on the Microsoft side, right? You're seeing that transformation where it's not help us and then go away. It's help us and then stay with us.
Yeah, it's a good point you raise. Often at the staff, the people who did the prior renewal aren't there. Sometimes you do get that. Um, um, Microsoft reps, you might have one that is there for 2 renewals, but it's rare, it's longer term. They
Mhm.
also move around and do different jobs and things like that. Um, and some of our job, if we did a renewal and we go to do the next one, and we're now up to doing the third renewal for some customers, is to bring that to bring that IP. So we can fast track that and go, okay, here's everything that was promised at the last renewal. Did you get it?
Mhm.
Right. And if we did the last renewal, we can show up and go, well, here's what you bought. Here's the benchmarking. Here's your exit point of your contract. By the way, here's all your contracts if you don't have a copy of them. Um, really fast track that process, right? And that's still quite common. We've got some customers that are very organized with a contract management tool and a software asset management tool. I would say that would be a third of our customers, and the rest, it's a bit all over the show. There's some that don't have a contract management system, don't have the contracts, not sure where things are, primarily because there's a change in staff, but that's okay. We're totally okay if you come up and go, okay, what's the starting point? Not sure. What's the bill of materials? Not sure. What's your IT budget? Don't know. I'll go and find out. That's fine. We have a phase in our methodology to work through that. It's not the customer's job to get everything organized before they hire us. We'll walk through that process. And then we see stress levels come down, anxiety comes down, we've got a deal strategy, and off we go. So yeah, it's I think from the way you just explained it with Oracle, if the contracts are multi-year, we see different people. But from an Oracle perspective, is that changing? Was it 2 and 3 years and it's now 4 and 5, or is it just consistent?
Well, Oracle's looking to make these longer term agreements. We're definitely seeing
Okay.
that on the Java side where they're trying to get customers to sign 5 years. Java used to be free,
Okay.
and now the
Hmm.
Oracle, did 1 year subscriptions, and now they want 5 year lock-ins, and often refusing to sell, not talking to customers. Customers are going to say, "Here's my money for 1 year," and Oracle says,
Hmm.
"Nope, nope, you have to buy 5 years." And so it's kind of crazy.
Right. Uh-huh.
And it sometimes forces customers, and you mentioned this, to go out of compliance, right? They want to renew with Oracle, but Oracle just refuses to take their money because they want a bigger check. And the for the most part, universally, customers are like, screw that. I'm not signing up for 5 years. If I'm
Mm.
willing to give you a year, you have to sell. It's on your price list, 1 year. The fact that you don't want to sell that to me is not my problem. So, whereas most of the time, customers are really reluctant to go out of compliance on purpose. They sort of view this as not their fault. We tried to renew with you, but you refused. Like, we were going to pay list price for a year.
Mhm.
So we're definitely seeing longer term Java deals, customers, from a cloud perspective. On the one hand, you want a really long term price commitment because you don't want a price increase. But that there's pluses and minuses to all of this, right? You do a really long
Mm.
deal, then you're locked in. You do 3 years and maybe annual renewals after that. You have more flexibility, but the pricing will change a little bit. So we're definitely seeing, Oracle looking at. I think I remember you talking about this when we were doing our webinars together. Cloud commits, right? Oracle is
Sure.
definitely, and I'm interested when we hang up here. Um, and in this show, I'll be looking through Oracle earnings announcement. Yes, that is my life. And, just to see what their cloud commits are, because I think that drives the stock, right? The behavior of the company is driven by the behavior of the stock. And it sort of goes down to the sales rep and the business practices and the licensing. So it's, there's that balancing act. We want long term because we don't want to hit with a price, but we want the flexibility. I think, something I hear from Oracle that's different. If you bought 100 licenses from Oracle and you pay 1 million a year, and now you use 60, you're still going to pay 1 million a year plus
Right.
inflation, right? That's sort of how their business practices. So some of the things that we see trip up procurement and IT is how different Oracle and Microsoft are. They just assume, oh, and Oracle's an EA type of agreement, and it's not. It's not that it's harder or easier. It's just different, and
Right.
that trips up customers all the time where they'll start talking to me and, like, no, that's how Microsoft does it. And you have to educate them on how Oracle does it, which is very different. Like, everybody uses Microsoft. So when you think about, like, Fortune, whatever, they're all using they're all experts in using
Sure.
Microsoft. I mean, we use Microsoft at Palisade, but same is not, although Oracle is almost ubiquitous. It's not as ubiquitous as Microsoft is. So people still think of licensing in a Microsoft world, and unless you've been burned or you've had the pleasure of negotiating directly with Oracle, we still see people who are surprised by things, which
Mhm.
surprises me. I'm like, how could you not know
Uh,
this? They're like, well, you've been doing it for 30 years. So
yeah, look, I think in summary, Microsoft contracts with customers. The EA was always 3 years. That's moved more to 5 years. 5 years is a concession. You got to negotiate it and ask for it. A very small number of customers have 7 year. Very large number of Azure commitments or EAs. A lot of the mid to large customers have moved to 5. And the last point you make about everyone's got Microsoft, that's why. If you're a Microsoft 365 customer on E3 or E5, you're probably going to be on Microsoft 365 in 5 years. Now, unless you're a Google Workspace customer, and I use both, if you're a Microsoft 365 customer, there's a very, very high chance you're going to be using that in 5 years. Extremely high. They're the market leader by a long, long way, and you've probably got your cybersecurity products bundled into that. Okay, so the name for 5 years. But Microsoft's view of longer contracts, loyalty doesn't get rewarded. You don't get more discount. If anything, you get less. That's their view. And you get ramped pricing. So the price of year 1 is less than the price of year 5. So price ramps up because discount ramps down. Because the answer is, yeah, you can have a 5-year contract, but you're going to pay a bit more for it or you'll go to ramped pricing. So it's the trade-off, right? And then you've got to negotiate that back to flat pricing over 5 years. Azure is different because, like Oracle Cloud, you make a spend commitment. A lot of that is 3 years. It was originally prepayments, right? When Azure was first around, you prepaid a big chunk of money and drew down on it. That created a lot of problems for Microsoft internally. They had to move away from that because reps were selling these things and getting paid on it, but none of it was getting consumed. So now it is make a commitment, pay as you consume it, and the Mac or the Microsoft Azure consumption commitments are normally 3 years, right? The problem with committing Azure to 5 years is even doing a 3-year forecast is hard. 5 years is you're probably guessing. Doesn't matter how good you are. It's very hard to predict that far out. Even with the best FinOps models, it's just hard. The longer out that is. But don't forget, Azure is not the market leader, and Microsoft 365 is. So you get very different views of that. Microsoft trying to bridge the gap to AWS as the market leader in terms of spend, revenue, and commit, trying to catch up. So they'll show a lot more appetite for doing things to catch AWS. And they are slowly doing that. Microsoft 365, it's firmly entrenched. They're the market leader by tenfold. And when you go to renewals, the renewals get less and less and less favorable for the customer the more you do them. So
And I'm convinced Microsoft Office, it's all because of Excel. They did not have Excel. Every business in the world runs on Excel. I don't care what your ERP platform is or your CRM. You take it and you put it in Excel, and then you do your real work there. So if I once I told my accountant, hey, we're going to use Apple numbers instead of Microsoft Excel, and she's, no, we're not. We're
yeah, it'll be
never doing
around. I mean, yes, everyone, I mean, we do, right? We use it, I mean, every day. I mean, I think I see Excel grid lines when I'm not in front of a computer.
that.
That's how much we use it. But
It's true.
it's changed. So creating formulas is AI in Excel.
Yeah.
Pivot tables, macros, so that part's changed, but you still need it, right? It's just buried inside Microsoft 365 because it's not the bright and shiny thing anymore.
I'll tell you, and it pisses off really experienced Excel users. I'm like, look at this amazing pivot table and chart that I did. And they're like, how did you do that? You don't know how to do that. I'm like, I ask AI. It just did it for me. You're like, that is cheating. You did not do your own work. You had somebody else do it for you.
Yeah, good.
Uh, So Mark, we have we're running out of time, but I did want to ask you one more thing because we're seeing this on our side. Last year, Microsoft and Oracle announced a new relationship. So they used to hate each other for
Mhm.
many years. As a matter of fact, when I was at Oracle and the Department of Justice was suing Microsoft, and there was we're going to break up Microsoft. I remember when that came down, Larry Ellison gave the entire Oracle, all the employees off that day so we can all go to the movies and see the movie Godzilla because he was like the death of Godzilla.
Uh-huh.
So now there's a new relationship and they're not exactly besties, but there's a new service where you can buy Oracle, you can run your Oracle database, basically these big Exadata engineered systems, these big servers. Microsoft
Sure.
bought a bunch of them and put them in Azure, and now they call it Oracle Database at Azure. And
Right.
we're seeing customers really interested in that. And Oracle does that with, Google and AWS and Microsoft. So 3 years ago, Oracle hated all of them, didn't have these partnerships. Now they love all of them, and they're sort of that's how Oracle's growing. Are you seeing on your side, are your customers asking about these services, or is it just sort of not an area where you're involved with yet, or have seen customers ask about it?
No, look, it's a good point. So if you take a step back, Oracle and Microsoft don't like AWS. Let's just kind of call that
Right.
out. There's some other moving parts here. Our Microsoft having partnerships with Oracle or other AI companies that aren't OpenAI, there's a bit of smoke screening going on with the FTC as well, right? It's a good look for them to have these partnerships broadly in the industry. Otherwise, you end up in DC in front of a whole lot of politicians asking you questions eventually. Um, and as Oracle moves, I mean, don't get me wrong, Oracle and Microsoft are competitors, very much so. Traditionally on the SQL database, DevTools, and OCI competes head to head with Azure. So they're competitors more than they're friends. Yes, they're friends because Microsoft wants Oracle to run natively on Azure. And they've made integration products, management products,
Hmm.
move your Oracle on-prem to Azure products, right? That's kind of good for Oracle because um, it stays Oracle. Not that good for Oracle because Oracle probably thinks it should be in their cloud. So it's a kind of which one do you want, right? But um, it's kind of the old frenemies thing, right? They compete very heavily. They're going to work a bit together. They both bid very aggressively to win the TikTok business, and one of them kind of seems to have come out better than the other on that. Um, so yeah, we do see it. The relationship's probably better than what it was 10 years ago, and I'm not across the detail of it, but running Oracle on Azure is something Microsoft wants, and Oracle will do it if it helps them not lose their footprint in the customer.
They're calling it cloud now. They're basically taking these
Right.
Exadata machines, putting them in Azure, and Oracle's using that as cloud revenue. There's some management on top of that, but it's a very expensive solution to a business problem that Oracle created, right? So
Right.
I think customers would rather just run on Azure, right? They don't necessarily. I mean, like, listen, there's going to be, yeah, financial services and sort of some industries that really
Yeah.
want that level of performance. But just like Oracle running on-prem, you don't have to have Exadata. It's just it's gives you a little extra than, or a lot extra than if you just ran it on generic commodity hardware.
Yeah.
So
And look, Microsoft have done a good job in making Azure a platform that's not really tied to one technology. I mean, for a long time, you've been able to run Linux on Azure, MySQL, Postgres, SQL databases of different flavors. The buying of GitHub was a big windfall for them in terms of getting all the developers more on board with Azure. They have done a good job of making it more and more vendor neutral. Don't get me wrong, it's still in the Microsoft world. So they want you to move every on-prem Windows and SQL Server to Azure. That's a goal, right? I mean, their goal is you should have no more servers on-prem. Use Azure Arc to see them, then bring them across. But that's the direction Azure's going. Uh, the reps at Microsoft are paid a lot more for Azure consumption. And the current flavor of the month is running SAP Rise on Azure and not on AWS. So there's a global initiative to make sure they win that SAP Rise business and bring it to Azure. lots of resources, lots of investment funds to try and make that happen.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Mark, before we sort of hit the record button, I was like, maybe we'll talk for 30 minutes, and now it's an hour later. So, um,
Uh,
so, and I could keep talking about this for much more, but it is like I said earlier, we're getting near Oracle's Microsoft's year end. You mentioned
mhm,
that a great time to start your 26 renewal is now. So,
sure.
if someone has a Microsoft issue or question or problem and they want some help, what is the best way to get a hold of Keystone and yourself?
Yep, certainly happy to help. We're easy to find. Jump on our website, keystonenegotiation.com, or go to my LinkedIn profile, Mark Kenny. You'll find me up there under Keystone. Happy to help, happy to do a call and give you some tips and insights early on. It is good news if you're even 6, 9 months out is a great time to be reaching out to us to help with your Microsoft Enterprise Agreement renewal.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, listen, and I recommend you guys all the time. So if anybody is listening and needs help with Microsoft, please reach out to Mark. You can connect with me, and I could connect you guys if you like. And Mark, thank you for being the world's greatest podcast guest today. We really appreciate it.
Great, no pressure. Love the title actually. And I look forward to listening to these in the future.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day. Great day,
Okay,
everybody.
thanks everyone.